Hi, and welcome to Guy in the Garage. Today I'm going to take a break from the e-ride and do something a little different, something that I've had fun with in the past and I'm going to continue today. And that's brass casting. And specifically what I'm going to be making is, it's a gift for my boss who's retiring. And it's going to be a set of brass knuckles. I know he's joked about it and he said, oh, I've always wanted a set. So what I'll be doing is actually making a set of brass knuckles, and I'll engrave them later, put a little message on there for them as a little display piece. And just for all legal purposes, where I live, brass knuckles are legal to possess, they're legal to own. If they're in your own house, that's fine, but if you're going out in public with them and you have them concealed on you, you have to have a permit. So that's just a legal disclaimer. If you're going to do this, just make sure you know the laws in your area. But for me, again, this is just a gift. It's going to be a display piece. But I do want to make it as realistic as possible with what I have here, basically in the garage in front of you. So what I'll start off, kind of show what I'm using to do this casting. You definitely need something that's going to get up to 2,000 degrees. The melting temperature of brass, I want to say, is around 1,800 Fahrenheit, something like that. I might be slightly off, but it is up there. So what I have is a Castmaster. This is the Castmaster GG5000. It was about $220. It's a pretty cool setup. It's basically just a stainless steel cylinder with a crucible in there, and that's a ceramic type of crucible. And it just runs off standard propane. It runs off your standard propane tank that you use for barbecue. You have your regulator. You have your air control here. That's it. That's really it. It just plugs into here, plugs on to a standard cylinder, and off you go. So that'll get your brass hot. That'll melt your brass. It'll get you that nice liquid. So next up is how am I actually casting this? So once you have the brass, it's all molten, you have to pour it into a form. You have to pour it into a shape. So I have this template. This is just a thin 3D printed template of some knuckles, and I'll be using this to do a lost foam cast. So I'm not physically making a cavity, I'm making it out of foam, and this is, when I say scrap piece of foam, it is very much so a scrap piece of foam. And what I'll do is I'll overlay this template on the foam. I'll cut it to size. I'll basically make these sets of knuckles out of this foam. And I'm just going to do that on a bandsaw and a jigsaw just to get all those little intricate cuts. And with these lost foam casts is once you pour that brass into that mold, and what I'm using is sand, green sand right here. I'll get into that here in a sec. But when you pour that and it contacts that foam, it immediately vaporizes, it burns away, it turns it into a gas, and you don't even worry about it. It doesn't even produce a lot of residue within the mold or within your cast piece. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be cutting basically an outline of knuckles. It's a little more time consuming, but I've had really good results with this, very clean results, and never had any issues. And it always allows you to make sure that once you pack your sand, you're not gonna have any issues with cavities forming and stuff like that. It'll give you a nice template. So what I'm using here is some green sand. I think I got this off Amazon. Teton Black 180. It's a very fine sand. It's almost like a clay. You can put a little bit of water in it, but it will give you a nice overall form when you're casting. I'll be using this little plate. It breaks open, and I'll show how I'm actually putting the casting sand in here, how I'm packing it in with the knuckles when I put that foam in here, and then I'll go through that process. But that's pretty much it. That's all I really need: some sand, that tray, and then obviously some of the safety gear. Not only is this very, very hot, and it is dangerous, you have to take a lot of precautions not to get any of this near you or on you, especially molten metal. Lead is pretty bad, but you're talking about twice the temperature when it comes to brass. And then I'm just using brass. These are old rifle casings. Specifically with these rifle casings, these are at the end of their life. These are some 300 Win Mag. Some even have case head separations. These have been reloaded about 5 times, and I've retired them, especially once I started having some case head separations. I've got some other rifle cartridges from 22, just some old brass that's either cracked or just needs to be discarded. And I'll supplement it with just another brass ingot that I've had from extras. So if I do have extra, I'll just pour them into forms, and I have these ingots. So I'll go ahead and supplement with that. Okay, so here I have my template. This is a pretty thick, this is a 2-inch piece. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut it right down the middle, and then I'll just cut the shape. This is way too thick, but I will make 2. This is enough for 2, and I did this before, and it worked out pretty well. So we'll see how this does, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut this on the bandsaw. Alright, so here's my rough outline. Now I just gotta make the holes and this bottom hole, the finger holes as I should say. Then what I'll do is I'll just cut this in half again and sand it down, make sure everything is nice and fine. I don't have too many ridges on there, so go ahead and do that. Alright, so here's the mess. So this is what I did when I cut it. I cut it in half, and then after using X-Acto, I cut all the finger holes out. And I made them a little tight, that's fine. What I'll do is once it's cast, I'll be able to sand it out, sand the brass down. This is about the shape I want. Everything looks pretty good. I'm gonna sand it down now, make sure there's not too many rough spots on there. And I'll do the same with this one. I wanna have 2 identical. I like making 2 in case something happens with one, not everything goes to waste, and then I'll have to repeat this process. So I might as well just make 2 at once. All right, here are my sanded foam templates. They look pretty good. The way I see it is the more you sand on this, the less you have to sand on the brass. But I made these a little big, or a little more material between the fingers, because I will be able to sand down that brass. So if there are any pits and stuff in here, I wanted to give myself a little more material. But overall, it's relatively smooth. So let's go ahead and start putting these in the mold and put the sand on it. All right, here we go. Let me start packing this sand. I need a little bit of water. Let's see. I'll give it a whirl. Okay, I think this is pretty good. What I'll do, straighten it out, get any excess off. Yeah, it looks like we have a little bit of graining, but I might be okay because I really don't care about this side. I just need it to be flat. Okay, here we go. This is what it looks like when it's flipped over. I had to redo it. The sand was a little bit on the dry side, but this looks good. You can see everything's filled in nicely. So what I'll do is I will fill the rest of this mold. Now what I'll do is when you pour anything molten, you have to have a fill hole and then a vent hole. So what it'll do is if it comes from this side, it'll fill in, and then you have to vent. Because that gas has to go somewhere. So what I'll do with this is I'll put 1 pour hole in and then 1 vent hole, sometimes 2 vent holes. So it depends. I've done 1 vent hole on these before and it came out fine, but 2 is good to be safe. Better safe than sorry, especially if I have a lot of brass that I can pour. Okay, so here are my pour and vent holes, still made out of styrofoam. So this one will be pour, this one pour, and this one vent. What I'll do now is I have this top portion up here, is I'll just continue very, very gently putting sand over this whole thing. And I want to start next to these pour and vent holes. Make sure that nothing's going to get damaged or I don't separate. So I'm just going to work my way around this pour hole first. And I just glue these. I just use some wood glue. It'll burn away the second I pour the brass in. Okay, I don't have to fill this whole thing up. It's just a waste of sand. But what I'm going to do is, around these fill holes, I want to make a little funnel. So when I do pour it in, I have a nice little point I can essentially aim it into. Alright, I'll call that about good. So what I'll do now is I'll get to the forge, fire that sucker up.
ahead and throw the brass in. I'm afraid that the zinc is starting to boil out, so I'm going to let it cool a little bit. You can see that yellow, that's all zinc. A little bit of borax right there to flux it, but it looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and pour it. That wasn't very pretty. I think I got a little too hot. We'll see. Form's gonna burn a little bit. That's all right.
All right, that wasn't pretty at all. The pour holes just didn't really do a good job, and it just kind of went everywhere. So I'm not thinking that it went all the way into the cavity, but we'll see. It's cooled down enough. I'm gonna go ahead and disturb it and see if I can get anything out of the sand. There's a lot of stuff on top, but I just poured everything that I had, and that's fine. I can remelt some of this stuff. Looks promising. That is actually looking really promising. Whew. Look at that. Yeah, I might have gone overboard, but that looks like a good set of knuckles right there. Alright, let's dunk it. Okay, so here we go. So it actually came out pretty well. I'm very surprised. You can see that's where the vent hole was. It should be cold now because I dunked it. That's the vent hole. Way up here, this was that pour hole. And it looks like it went all the way through. Burned all that foam out. And it looks good. I'm just gonna chop these off and then start cleaning these up. Let's check the other ones. Ain't this one a mess? Again, I poured way too much. I don't know if it went all the way in, but whatever. I'll just recycle this brass. Looks good. Actually looks pretty good, better than I thought. Okay, here we go. That's what we're looking at. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna cut these off. And then I'm gonna take a angle grinder with a flapper and just start getting all the rough spots out, smoothing it out, making it nice. And then later on I use a Dremel, make sure I get in here, smooth that out too. And any rough spots, which honestly it looks pretty good. I think this is one of the better ones, other than all this excess, which is fine. There's a couple little bad spots in here, but I'll try to just sand it down. I made it a little thicker anyway, so let me start getting to that. Okay, here's what it looks like after going to town with it. I'm getting this done with the grinder, with the flapper. Looks pretty good. Nice and shiny, nice and smooth. A lot of these rough edges have been cleaned up. The only thing I noticed on these is there's a little bit of a hole. This is where it was poured. So I have a little pocket in here, which I really can't do anything about, unfortunately. But that's okay. If I get these engraved, I'll get engraved on this side. And you won't even see this side. It doesn't really do much to it. It's just the way it poured. There was probably just a little pocket at the end. Doesn't look too deep. It's maybe 1/8 of an inch deep, and then it ends. So what I'll do now is I'll just use a Dremel and clean these inner, I guess, finger pieces. Alright, I am back for day 2. So here's what they look like, front, back. This is after I sanded down with a 80 grit flapper wheel on the angle grinder. Just got some of the low spots out, some of the little marks, indentations, and I just went over it. So it's looking nice. What I'll do now is I'll take the Dremel and I'll speed this up and I'll speed through it and make these finger holes, get all this rough stuff out, and then smooth it on the outside. Alright, see if I can get this to focus. So that's what it looks like once it's cleaned up. You can see the difference between where it's rough and then where it's nicely cleaned up. So I'll work all 4 of these and then this inside space. And I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be back here in a little bit. Alright, what I decided to do, because I can't really get in here, I mean I've got some bits that can get into this bottom slot, but I'm just going to put it on the mill, clean it up a couple times, and then it'll be nice and squared. I think this will just look a little better, so here we go. Alright, it's not perfect, but I just have a little better hole, and I'll clean it up with the Dremel now. Okay, I'm getting pretty close. Just continue to clean it up. I'm going to use a little finer bit with the Dremel, get in there on all of these, and I also want to bevel the edges a little bit to make it smooth, make it blend well with fingers. Looks pretty good. I like that. And then once I'm done with that, once I'm done with all the little details here, I'm going to start using a 200 grit, 400 grit, and then I'm going to try to make these pretty much a mirror finish, mirror polish, because I will get them engraved here. So let's get to it. Okay, looking pretty good here. I got all the holes beveled nicely. It's looking pretty shiny. But what I'll do is I'll use a sander. I got some 150. I think I was going to start with 200, but 150 will be good. And I'll just go over the top, go over the sides, just to give it that polish. And I'll work my way up, probably 400, 600, and then I got all the way up to 2500. I don't think I'll need it to get that shiny. I'll probably just use some Brasso at the end. But let me go ahead and do that, and just keep stepping up the polish until I get a nice mirror finish on the front and the back. Okay, this is what it looks like after doing 220. About to step it up to 400. This is what 400 looks like. Got a nice shine. It's starting to reflect a little bit, but I'll hit it with 600 now. I wish I had a buffer wheel. I don't have a buffer wheel. I just have a sander. But this brass actually polishes up fairly nicely. Just stepping up on sandpaper. But a buffer wheel would be nice to get some of these edges where it's hard to get in with this sander. So let's step it up. Okay, here's after 1,000, and I'm pretty much getting a close to mirror finish. I'm just gonna hit it with 2,500 just for fun, see what happens. But I think this is about it. This is probably as much polish I'm gonna get out of it. I do have some Brasso, which does work great for polishing up brass, hence the name Brasso. So we'll try with the 2,500, see what that looks like here in a couple minutes. Alright, these things are done. So I used Brasso, and I also used a aluminum magnesium polish. It's Mother's. It's this stuff. This is great. I originally got this for cleaning revolver cylinders, just for the carbon, and it really does polish up stainless steel. But I found that it works great on that. But pretty much have a mirror finish, a couple of scuffs. That's fine. It'll get engraved. Okay, that pretty much finishes up the video here. Nice set of knuckles, nice and polished. So very happy with it. I think it'll be a great gift to give to my boss as a retirement gift. Put a little message in there for him. But I'm happy. This whole process, how it turned out. First, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but with the forge and how I poured into the molds, everything came out great. So thank you for watching. This is Guy in the Garage. Please subscribe for more videos. I'll be putting out more stuff, not just on the E-Ride Pro, what I've been doing, some of the projects on the bike, but some more things, some more unique things, kind of like this, because it's a lot of fun to put this stuff together and to share it. So thanks again for watching.